Hello, welcome back. That's right, we're going to talk about Star Wars. I don't get to talk about Star Wars nearly enough, and I thought since it's supposed to be, it's now my holiday, and I should have done this yesterday. I'm going to talk about Star Wars, and then I'm going on holiday. That's the plan. That's what I want to do. Uh, I have a whole lot of notes prepared for today, some topics I want to discuss around Star Wars, playing a Star Wars campaign or a game or running a Star Wars game. I wanted to actually go into that in a bit of detail. And so that's what we're going to do. So, my suggestion to you is grab some food, some drink, get comfortable, and I will go into, well, I'm going to not promise that it will be under 8 minutes, my presentation, because I wrote far too much. It's Star Wars after all, and there's certain things, as many of you know if you've watched my channel, I get caught up in the topic sometimes and I wind up talking for way too long. Anyway, let's see how this works out. I'm hoping this works out as well as we possibly can. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about role-playing games, but not just any role-playing game. I am a fan of Star Wars, so I want to talk about how do you actually play and run a Star Wars tabletop role-playing game. Now, this is just my opinion. I'm sure there are many different ways, but this is what I'm going to suggest to you. There are actually a lot of different Star Wars tabletop role-playing games that you can select that use different dice mechanics, like the West End D6. We have the Star Wars Revised D20. We also have the Star Wars Saga D20, which I'm familiar with. There's also the special picture dice for Edge of the Empire. So there's a lot. The original Star Wars trilogy and the prequel stories have common themes that make great adventures or journeys. I will discuss how the Star Wars movies, the 6 Star Wars movies, can inform what a tabletop role-playing game experience might be like. So what are the themes for a Star Wars game? Well, the cycle of the hero's journey, which mirrors every person's journey from childhood to adulthood, and this is represented by Luke Skywalker. We have the traditional pattern that the tragic hero experiences, still finding redemption at the end of their life, and this is Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader. We have how a futuristic galactic civilization will still struggle with democracy being threatened by tyranny, which is the Empire rising up. People's actions in a relationship for any kind of dysfunctional family still strive to repair the wounds and trauma that's been caused. And this is the Skywalker family. Relationships between Leia, Luke, and Anakin. How training and effort can allow the spirit or force, in this case, to triumph over advanced technology. And what is this represented by? The Jedi. We have ancient mythology and legend heavily influencing the stories and themes of Star Wars movies, as they are presented. Star Wars is not just the impossible future of a ridiculous science fiction world, but our potential reality yet to come, because we don't really know what it's going to look like. Star Wars movies have a message of hope. And this is the thing you need to remember. Even in a galaxy at war, Star Wars, there's always hope. So where do you draw Star Wars inspiration from? So I would say, if you're a game master or a player, you draw your inspiration for Star Wars campaigns and your characters from the following, and there's a lot of them. Star Wars is a huge mix of existing fantasy and science fiction literature. That means books, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Martian novels, or the Barsoom series. A lot of the names, images, concepts have been copied directly from those books and used in Star Wars. John Carter, the movie, is a good indication of this. It has been adapted from the book The Princess of Mars, and it highlights many of the Star Wars themes that were not originally presented by George Lucas. This is not something that George did initially himself. They are presented by Edgar, actually. The melodramatic nature of a television soap opera, those soap operas, those things that play during the middle of the day, they actually influence Star Wars with normal life experiences that we all have, maybe exaggerated, like friendship, interpersonal conflict, betrayal, love, sickness, injury, and death. At the root of Star Wars is also the Japanese culture, their legends, their movies of feudal Japan. The original Star Wars movie, the actual movie itself, A New Hope, is based off a Japanese movie called The Hidden Fortress. The Jedi are a science fiction, westernized depiction or reflection of the samurai from feudal Japan. And probably most of you know this. But also too, Greek mythology has a huge influence on the Star Wars stories. Even the American Wild West, or if you're not from America, the frontier lifestyle is explored in Star Wars, which means that pretty much every single Western movie you've ever seen or every book revolving around the Old West is potentially another Star Wars adventure. So what are the motives for your characters? What are the goals that they might have? So honor, codes of conduct, even if it's not honor, but some sort of code of conduct is always part of a Star Wars story or science fiction, even in a science fiction-like era. It still requires sacrifice. It still requires you to strive for a higher ethical foundation, even amongst something like the Star Wars universe. Character stories involve that universal fight that we have between good and evil, and in this case, Star Wars, it's the light and the dark side of the Force. Star Wars characters highlight the journey that everyone has to take as they navigate the world. There isn't a campaign more appealing or an adventure more worthwhile taking that is not promised by Star Wars. Star Wars as a universe, as an experience, is really compelling for anyone, in my opinion. Now, at the very, I guess, if you would take it right back and you pulled all the layers away, modern mythology is what Star Wars is. And it's taken up lots of different things. There are so many different influences. I'm going to sort of give you an idea of a few of them. So, Wyatt Earp, the American lawman that brought justice to the lawless criminals at the OK Corral gunfight. And what does that tell us? The actual mythology, the actual story, what it's trying to indicate to us, is sometimes the law has to exceed the boundaries that have been set in place. We have the Lone Ranger, for anybody who's aware of what the Lone Ranger is. The Lone Ranger is left for dead. He's a ranger, basically a law person, who has been wiped out, an entire group of them. And now he has a trusted horse called Silver and an Indian friend, of all things, an Indian friend called Tonto. And this is really sort of indicating that fighting outlaws sometimes requires that justice hide their face. Otherwise, they're going to get hurt. You have the lifestyle and freedom of a cowboy, that hard-working person, okay, who can pretty much overcome anything, whatever harshness that might exist in the world, or in the galaxy in this case, can be overcome by the cowboy. We also have the tale of, now I might get this wrong, Zatachi, I think it's Zotachi, and this is the blind samurai, who secretly is highly skilled, but pretends to be weak, quite deliberately. And what this communicates is that you can't judge people for what you see, or how they present themselves, or what you expect. You have the Seven Samurai, and that is a story that was put out quite a long time ago. It's been remade so many times. And this is veteran samurai that have fallen on hard times. And so they protect a village from bandits just for a meal and a place to stay. And the lesson from that is that even the weakest can be taught how to defend themselves from those who would take advantage of them. You have the Ronin samurai that wanders the land with no master, looking for a purpose. And that is everyone looking for a meaning to their life, often represented by the Jedi. You have Yojimbo, which is the crafty Ronin samurai who tricks two criminal gangs in a town into wiping each other out. And what this is trying to do is directly communicate that if you directly confront two overwhelming threats or forces, it is not the best strategy. So you have to use trickery. You have Pandora's box that is opened and unleashes illness upon the world, which is from Greek mythology. And what it's trying to communicate is that not all knowledge and not all technology is healthy. And what is Pandora's box? It's the Death Star. You have Theseus accepting help so that he doesn't get lost in the labyrinth when he has to try to defeat the Minotaur. And this is trying to communicate and say, sometimes you need to have help, okay? You need to accept help when it is offered. You also have King Midas and his golden touch, and that highlights that greed and lust for power can turn against you. And this is the battle and fight within each individual, not to wind up becoming Sith or turning to the dark side. Again, another Star Wars theme. And then we have one last one, which is communicated in a strange way and in two different ways. And I might get this wrong, but we have the story of Icarus and, will I get this right? Daedalus and Icarus. Now, Daedalus creates wings for Icarus so they can fly away, so they can escape. And this actually teaches children that they should listen to their elders, because the father tells Icarus, do not fly too close to the sun or your wings will melt, and that's exactly what Icarus does. And of course his wings melt and he falls into the sea and he dies. And what this is trying to do is communicate the story and the ideas behind Luke Skywalker when he does not listen to Yoda and he doesn't listen to Obi-Wan. But that later on, when he finds his way and he's finally reached adulthood, their counsel is no longer the best choice. The best choice is not always to go and do exactly what your elders do, but initially it certainly is. So there's a bit of a twist on that one. I always find it interesting how so much mythology fits in with Star Wars. I like the fact that it does, and George Lucas was always trying to make Star Wars a modern version of mythology and story, and that's how you do it. It's really simple. You look back at the past and you bring it forward. I'm hoping this was useful to you, and if it was, fantastic. I want to thank my patrons who support me on Patreon. I want to thank you for watching and listening. And hey, till next time, may the force be with you, and keep rolling those 20s. All right, give me a second. I've just got to open some windows and doors because I'm going to cook in here otherwise. Let's try this one as well. Oh, yeah. It's a good thing you can't see what I'm up to, people. Righty-ho. Yeah, let's do that. Open, and here we go, jumping in. Okay, I'm ready now. So I apologize, that's a little bit longer than what I usually do for any kind of presentation, but it's Star Wars and I find myself struggling to not wind up saying way too much. I don't know how you feel about what I've just said. Maybe you see the similarities, maybe you see something else. I'm certainly here to discuss it for a little while, I'm probably not going to hang around for more than an hour because I would like to go and get on with my holiday. I'm going to get rid of the hat. It is hot and I need to relax a little bit. So anyway, what have we got here so far? Now, I see Fred Huber said he couldn't make it. That's fine. Fred, you have shown up to so many live streams. It's not a problem. Never has been. Never has been. I appreciate when you are here. Pale Rider. Hello, Pale Rider. How are you doing? What's the armor class for the metal bikini? That's always a good question, eh? I can kind of understand why people get upset, particularly women get upset about the metal bikini. It's like, what were you trying to do? Really? Really? Hello, Eric. Eric, how are you doing? So one of my best friends ran a Star Wars campaign. Okay. He's not alive anymore, but it was one of the best game sessions I've ever played. I was a Jedi, and my one buddy's Toad, and my one buddy's Toad, the line turned dark. Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. All right. Yeah, that can happen. In a Star Wars campaign, your main characters can wind up falling from grace. And when they fall from grace completely, I know my experience playing in a Star Wars campaign and also being a game master in a Star Wars campaign is that, when you play your character that way, you lose your character. So it's sort of like that's how you wind up retiring your character. Retirement for your character is not you settle down on a farm or you start a temple practice or you have a castle or maybe you're buried in a grave because you died. It's not that end. It's your journey winds up being a different journey, and it's not the journey that you as a player take anymore. So yeah, no, I get that one. We GM so well it felt like it could have been in Legends. Yes, I miss playing in a Star Wars campaign. I really do. It is hard to get somebody to actually take part in it. I don't know why it's so difficult. It's so much easier to find people who will just play in a fantasy world, like Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy world, Forgotten Realms, blah, 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 whatever it is. Become a patron member and help Fred get a window unit AC. The problem with the window unit AC is it would be so noisy. Do you know what I mean? Even if I had there isn't space in my office for something like that. It's just not practical. So yeah. It's all right. Look, my channel doesn't make a lot of money. This is why my day job supports the channel to keep it going, and my patrons support me by helping me out so that I can keep doing things. And a little bit of AdSense revenue from YouTube does it as well. So I really wanted to talk about this today. I was almost going to call it off, but it's a good topic to talk about because the last week at my day job has been rough. The last 2 days, last night, my day job broke me. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was beside myself. So need a bit of Star Wars in my life. That's what I need. A little bit of Star Wars in my life. So I'm going to keep an eye on chat, but I thought I would talk. Now, this is not the main presentation, but I still wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the topics that I was discussing. Just saying, Honda, right? Okay. I don't even think you could get a Honda unit in New Zealand. I think they classify the best units. I've got one of the best types of units here in my house, but it's not in my office. Do you know what I mean? It's in the lounge where it needs to be. My office is, I don't live in my office. If I did, that would be a terrible fate. But so what I thought I would do is I would pull apart a little bit some of the stuff, because I keep talking about how Star Wars is a reflection of the Wild West or the frontier lifestyle, or it's a reflection of Greek mythology, or it's a reflection of Japanese samurai or Japanese culture, and it is, and it's certainly Edgar Rice Burroughs. I mean, it's clear to me that George probably read everything that Edgar ever wrote. and for good reason. Okay, there's a good reason to do so. So what I thought I would do is I would kind of break down some of these characters and kind of give you a little bit more around them. So let's start with something like Wyatt Earp, because Wyatt Earp, American lawman, I mean, the story behind Wyatt Earp is obviously taken out of context and probably not historically correct if you're watching movies, okay? If you're watching movies, you're getting a different picture. But one of the sort of the elements to it that comes down to is not just the OK Corral gunfight, but the fact that really what you were dealing with was a situation that could not know. You know, he was a lawman, but he was also a gambler, and the idea is that at some point, even when you work within the law, you know, the people that you're trying to deal with don't work within the law. And so you have to break out of that. Now, one of, I guess, the best reflections of this in Star Wars, in terms of Wyatt Earp, surprisingly, it's not the Mandalorian. For those of you who are thinking it's the Mandalorian, it's not the Mandalorian. No, it's actually the rebellion. The rebellion versus the Empire. Because that is the story that it sort of reflects, but on a much larger scope. Because Wyatt Earp got engaged in that gunfight because his brothers, a brother got killed, okay, and they were injured. So there was nobody else who was going to deal with that. There was nothing else he could do other than face it himself. Now you could say that's revenge, and I'd kind of agree with that. But there's a point where sometimes things just don't get done that need to be done, and we wind up having to take control of our situation and do things that we wouldn't normally do, and that's what that's kind of reflect. And so this is why when you're having whether you're playing a character or you're running a story for somebody in a Star Wars universe, you need to have that battle between law and lawless, and sometimes having to jump over that border, because not all laws are good laws. You can have bad laws, and this is the reflection of the Empire, where there are so many laws out there, but they're not good laws. They're bad laws. The laws that constrain people, let people get away with things they shouldn't be allowed to get away with, and so you have to actually take control. And this is what the rebellion is sort of reflecting in that. His character died as a Sith trying to become an emperor. So that is a dark story for a character, Eric. That is a dark story. Thank you for sharing that. So Pale Rider, I've never played a tabletop Star Wars, but I really enjoy Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 on the Xbox. So there's a reason why. Look, I've played Star Wars Saga, and I don't expect people to go and play a new system and to get that experience, because it's hard to get people to do it. There is a reason why I did introduce people to Star Wars 5e. I know a lot of you are playing Star Wars, playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and to get your groups to go and play something else would be difficult, particularly if they're very attached to Dungeons and Dragons 5e and that rule set, and they don't want to learn anything else. So introduce them to Star Wars 5e. It's free. There are 4 books. It's got what you need. One of the books has everything that you really need to get started. And the rest of the stuff in you don't have to pay anything for it. There is no barrier to entry, okay? You go find that live stream, you'll find everything that you need. So, this is the time to give it a try. Like, spread your wings and see what it's like. I know a lot of people don't want to have anything to do with Star Wars anymore because of the new movies that were made, the Disney movies. I get it, I understand it, but I don't, if you have an issue with that in terms of Star Wars, the Disney Star Wars, just don't watch those movies. Star Wars is not lost. It is still there. We still have the older movies. You have the literature, all the books that were written. I've read some of them, not all of them. Not all of them are great. I stopped reading them a long time ago, I have to say. There's a point where I can only deal with so much. But yeah, but if you look back at the original George Lucas movies, I think that sort of highlights a lot of different things. So even Qui-Gon is a good example of Wyatt Earp. And in fact, if anything, out of all the characters, I would say that Qui-Gon from the Phantom Menace is probably the best depiction of Wyatt Earp. He's basically Jedi. He's a lawman. He's there for a purpose. He's supposed to be doing something, but he doesn't always follow the rules exactly as they have been laid out. And so he gets himself into trouble for doing that, but he doesn't really have much other choice. So that's, I guess, what I was going to say, is, Qui-Gon is a good example of Wyatt Earp. Hello, Prepare, Cook and Survive. Hello, Stuart. How are you? It was kind of funny. He got shot by a ship blaster critical hit. I was like, oh bro, the GM felt bad. So what Erica's talking about is it's very easy for a character to die in a starship battle. It is always it's probably the one thing that goes through the mind of a game master when they're running Star Wars. Is like, starships are pretty fragile, and even if you have a really tough starship, if the battle goes badly, if the starship gets hit and has like no more hit points, everybody on the ship is dead. Well, not necessarily. You have space suits. You can have them in a space suit. They can be in the derelict. There's a way of getting around this. So if you're worried about, oh no, hang on, if they have a ship and it gets destroyed, as long as it doesn't blow up into little bits, but ships don't destroy themselves that way. It's not unless you're getting hit by the Death Star beam. Like if the Death Star beam hits you, maybe that's going to be a problem. But then what would stop you from running your campaign as Force Ghosts? I don't know that you needed to. I mean, what would be wrong with just starting new characters? So yeah, it's up to you. So there is a way of getting around I got hit by a starship blaster and the ship is no longer functioning and everybody on the ship should be dead by now. No. There's ways around that. I've been there. I've had that aggravation and that concern. There is a way to do it. What do you got here? Closest things to Jedi played was the closest thing to a Jedi I played was a Cyber Knight in Palladium Rifts. Okay. I haven't played Rifts, but I am aware of it. Okay. I recommend if look, I still you read the novels but not watch the Disney movies. So there's Wyatt Earp. So Wyatt Earp's a really good example of Qui-Gon and sort of having to exceed the boundaries of the law. And then we also have, now for those of you who are aware of this character, you may not because it's quite an old character, but you never know. A lot of my audience are American, so they probably do know of the Lone Ranger. So the Lone Ranger was a TV series many years ago, black and white. He was part of a group of rangers who were doing their job and they get ambushed and everybody's killed. And he's the only one left alive. And he's left for dead. They think he's dead, but he's not. And he's found by the Indian Tonto. And he winds up with a horse called Silver. And he winds up firing silver bullets, which is supposed to represent the fact that he is able to deal with, I guess, the supernatural in a certain degree. But it was supposed to be that the silver bullet was supposed to represent the purity of his cause. In other words, even though he wore a mask, even though he was fighting outlaws and he wasn't actually a designated lawman anymore, he was at one point. And in many respects, he did work outside the law as well. He was a really good indication and reflection of how sometimes when you want to impart justice or for something to be corrected, you have to hide your identity. One, because it protects the people around you that you might love, but also because it protects you, because you can't be this Lone Ranger figure all the time. One of probably the best examples of this is actually The Mandalorian. I would say the Mandalorian TV series that Disney's been putting out is a really good reflection. It's a really good reflection of the Lone Ranger, because if anything's going to be the Lone Ranger, then the Lone Ranger, Tonto. Who's Tonto in this case? Well, it's the Baby Yoda character for the Mandalorian. And who is the horse? Silver? No, it's his spaceship. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to figure out. So if you were wondering how they came up with the story of the Mandalorian, it's the Lone Ranger story. That's what it is. And if you're looking back at some of the older movies and trying to find a character that's reflected in that, again, I think you're probably almost to a certain degree, but not exactly, but to a certain degree, there are elements within various characters that are reflected as part of the Lone Ranger character, the mythology of the Lone Ranger. Somebody who was trying to do right and was left for dead, almost killed, and winds up picking up the mantle again, but has to change their persona completely. I watched The Lone Ranger when I was a kid. Well, so did I. It was before my time, by the way. For those of you who think that I'm that old, and I'm not that old. It was well before my time. Came on right before the old black and white Superman. I do remember this because I don't think the scheduling, I don't know if I played it exactly at the same time that you're stating, Pale Rider, but I am aware that I watched the old black and white Superman, which was an odd thing to be watching. I always thought it was odd that Superman had a pot belly, but it's a different time. And then we had the Lone Ranger as well, and I watched all the Lone Ranger and I watched all of the old black and white Superman as well. Done a remake of the Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp. It basically lacked Jack Sparrow Western. Was a fun movie if I remember, probably not lore accurate though. Well, again, so that particular Lone Ranger movie with Johnny Depp in it, I didn't really like that much. I think the only thing that they sort of tried to reflect was the supernatural nature of what the Lone Ranger and Tonto were having to deal with. But really, that was not really the story of the Lone Ranger. I mean, it's called the Lone Ranger, but that movie should have been called Tonto, because that was really just basically Johnny Depp's movie. It's weird to go and make a story, call it the Lone Ranger, when it really should have been called Tonto. There is a movie that was made earlier than that with I can't remember the actor's name. It's the guy who was in Back to the Future as Doc, and it's a better movie, I think, but it's also got it's a bit corny. It's a bit silly in places, because one of the things you'll notice about the Lone Ranger, right, is that the Lone Ranger used to shoot guns out of people's hands. He didn't kill anybody, and that made it even more odd, but also redeemable in some way. Hello, Nacho Man. How are you doing? Nice to have you here. So yeah, I've talked a lot about the Old West, but I think there's one other thing I need to talk about, and that is the lifestyle and freedom of the cowboy. Now, whether you're American or whether we're dealing with New Zealand frontier lifestyle, it's really about that person on the frontier who's had to pull themselves away from civilization, and they are trying to eke out a lifestyle in some way where nobody else would normally live. And that sort of lifestyle is reflected in the cowboy, but also it's the frontier person who has a hard life, that works hard, and you put them anywhere else and they can overcome anything in the harsh world. And that is the mythology behind that. And you see that in the likes of Luke Skywalker's uncle and aunt, who are running this evaporation this farm, evaporation farm. But you also see it reflected in the fact that there are so many on the edge of civilization right throughout the whole thing. You know, it doesn't matter where you go, there's something else that's going on. I'm just going to close my door because somebody just came home. Even something like Sky City and Empire Strikes Back, where Lando is, they are still eking out in a different way. They are sort of still a reflection of the cowboy, trying to deal with being away from civilization and find a way of making a life for themselves. Just popped in to say quick hi, about to play Forge of Fury on Roll20. That's right, today, that's right, you've got a game today and you're game mastering tomorrow, aren't you, Nacho? I do remember. I remember you saying you had 2 games, or was it 3? Anyway, all the best with your game. I'll see you later. Okay, so that's that aspect. So let's start talking about some of the characters and mythology behind the Jedi and the samurai, because the blind samurai, the tale of Zatoichi, Zatoichi, I think it's Zatoichi. I'm not entirely sure. My Japanese has never been very good. I have struggled to pronounce. I mean, it looks like it's not. I mean, it's written in English with English lettering, but it's not pronounced that way. Okay. Anyway, the blind samurai. This is really a reflection of how what you see, is not actually the truth. And judging a person from how they are dressed and how they look, from what apparent frailties they might have, where it might be a lack of sight, or if they present the way they present themselves as being, not aggressive, doesn't actually mean that that's what you're dealing with. And that's what's really interesting about that character. And the blind samurai, if there's any story that should be made into a movie, it's the blind samurai. And it should be about a Jedi. And it shouldn't be about a Skywalker Jedi. It should be just about a Jedi. Sort of nobody that nobody really knows. And where they come from, it's almost like the man with no name, like the Clint Eastwood movies, like A Fistful of Dollars, stuff like that. I think that's the story that really was reflected. Where do you get that, though? When you think in terms of the blind samurai, there's never really been one that's reflected. To a certain degree, almost all Jedi are reflected in this way. I would say outside of, when you look at something like Obi-Wan Kenobi always looks like, there's always the talk about it's just an old man, but it's not just an old man. And then you see that reflection in A New Hope of somebody who can actually stand up to something much stronger than themselves. And then you also see that same sort of reflection in the likes of Yoda. So I would say the blind samurai is also reflected in Yoda. So Yoda comes off and presents himself as being sort of an imbecile, just a strange little creature in a very foresty or jungle-like environment, living in the wild, and with no nuance whatsoever, with a dim mind, not very smart, and just likes to have fun. And that's not what Yoda is. Yoda is, in many respects, kind of like the blind samurai, but not blind. He always presents himself as being something lesser in that movie, and also to a certain degree, but I would say it's mostly in The Empire Strikes Back rather than Return of the Jedi. sometimes in that as well. I'm just going to grab some water. I'm getting a bit dry. So those of you who have been on my channel before, you know I always end a lot of my presentations with, and my live streams and videos with, and keep rolling those 20s. And a lot of people have assumed, and I've noticed people copying me, but making slight adjustments to that saying. Do you guys understand what I mean when I say keep rolling those 20s? Because I don't think people do understand. Yeah, keep rolling those 20s. May all your rolls be 20s. So that is Professor Dungeon Master. When I say keep rolling those 20s, I don't mean that you should keep rolling. I want you to be able to roll a 20 every single time. That's never what that was supposed to communicate. It's not saying that the way that you play is you roll a 20-sided dice. You know, playing a game is about rolling a 20. It's not about that. It is a metaphor for keep playing games. It's about keep playing tabletop role-playing games. Now, whether that's Dungeons and Dragons or something else, it really doesn't matter. So when I say keep rolling those 20s, I don't really mean keep rolling a natural 20 or keep rolling a 20-sided dice for your game. It actually means a lot more than that. It's much broader. It is just a very generalized metaphor in many respects. It took a long time to come up with it, but anyway, it's interesting. Yeah, keep playing role-playing games. And in many respects, it was a reflection early on of keep playing Dungeons and Dragons, but actually it was meant to mean more than that, because I have played more than just Dungeons and Dragons. So it was supposed to reflect just keep playing tabletop role-playing games. That's what it means. You mean Cloud City? Sky City is, Sky, I mean Cloud City, not Sky City. Yes, Sky City is a phallic symbol. It looks like a great huge syringe pointing at the sky. I never forget the scene when Yoda pulled out his lightsaber and ignited it. Yes, that was a bit of a shock, was it not? Considering our expectation of what Yoda was capable of doing. Obviously that's one of the earlier movies, and he's a little bit younger then. Not quite as old, you know. In the prequels, he was a bit younger. Yes, I suppose you could say keep rolling those 20s as have a good life. But I always felt like your life was going to be better by playing a tabletop role-playing game. It has always been so. That it was always been a sort of a push from me to try to indicate to you, anybody who's watching, that your life is probably going to be better by playing some sort of tabletop role-playing game. Do you know why? Because you're playing with people, you're socially interacting, and you're addressing all of those things that you can't always address. This is why I get upset when they remove slavery from tabletop role-playing game supplements, because it's one of the key things we want to address. Anyway, there's another story, and it's been remade a few times, and there's a fly buzzing around in here. I don't know how this is going to work. We'll see how we go. I might have to open the door and just let it fly away. We'll see. If it comes back again, the door gets opened again. Okay. The 7 step. Oh, okay. All right. We're just going to open it. That's a big bugger in there. Okay. Right. So the 7 Samurai. So this is a really old movie. It spawned many different stories after that. Like there was other movies that were made, other books that were written. The Magnificent Seven, which was a Western. And this is really, it's supposed to teach a lesson. It's part of the mythology of that. Just because you have a group of of people who are weak dealing with somebody who is stronger, doesn't mean that they can't overcome that. And so with the right people and some training and assistance and accepting some sacrifice, because you know when you fight tyranny, you have to sacrifice something, and that might be your life. And so that's that's part of the. It's something that I think a lot of us don't really understand. When you think about our ancestors, even our grandparents probably fought more than we do now, and probably sacrificed a lot more. So that's part of the mythology of Star Wars, is that with help from the right people at the right time, when you're dealing with something that is threatening your freedom and your safety and your life, you can overcome that, but you need to learn new skills, you need to prepare, you need to organize yourself, you need to have the courage to do so, and you not just that, you really need to accept that some sacrifice is going to be required. And a lot of parents do sacrifice themselves for their children. I see that all the time. I see people who immigrate, for example. Often their life is not going to be very good, but they immigrate and they work hard with the intention that hopefully their kids will do well. It's the same thing when you're dealing with war. So yes, I think the Seven Samurai is a really good example of this, and the Magnificent Seven, because the story of the Seven Samurai isn't just about the Seven Samurai. It's also about the villages that they help, and their journey and their struggle. I won't go too much into the Ronin samurai wandering the land trying to find purpose, because like almost all mythology at some point has some story around everybody trying to find some sort of meaning to life. And the meaning to life, done a lot of philosophy, the meaning to life is always different for everybody, right? So I'm going to just skip past that one. I won't go into that. I would like to sort of also point out Yojimbo was remade. So Yojimbo is a Japanese movie that was remade, and they made A Fistful of Dollars with Clint Eastwood as a western. Okay, it's a spaghetti western, and it's about a crafty samurai or gunslinger, if you're dealing with a western, who tricks two criminal gangs who pretty much hold the whole town to ransom. They control the whole place, and he gets them to wipe each other out by playing each one off the other, and that's really that story is a reflection of how direct confrontation with overwhelming threats is probably not the best strategy, that you need to use a different strategy for dealing with that. And the best strategy is trickery and not frontal confrontation. You might still have to fight, and there might still be some blood to fall, and it might still require a hard time, and somebody's going to die, but direct confrontation is not the best route when you're dealing with overwhelming forces. So it's an interesting thing that this story was told a long time ago, then remade, and then they remade another one that retold the same story again for a few dollars more, I think it was called. Also had Clint Eastwood in it. So it's been remade, and that's probably a story that needs to be remade again for Star Wars, I would imagine. When it comes to Greek mythology is an interesting one in terms of the stories that they have. Not all Greek mythology is reflected in Star Wars, but there are some that stand out. 42, right, you're talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I get it. So if you ever study philosophy, they will teach you about the meaning of life, and they give you a lot of different reasons. But ultimately, what you find out that the meaning of life is what meaning you find along the way. So it's always different for somebody. That's all I have to say about that one. Anyway, so Greek mythology is an interesting one because there's probably only about 4 Greek myths that are reflected in Star Wars. And I think George Lucas was quite deliberate in why he selected those ones. And one of the most, one of the biggest ones is definitely Pandora's box. If you know the story of Pandora's box, where the box is opened, it unleashes an illness on the world. And this is the reflection of the development of technology. That, in Star Wars, the development of the Death Star, is not good. It's not a good thing. It might seem like it's a good idea, but it's not a good thing. That the development of anything that can cause harm is going to be a problem. And there's lots of things, whether that's an illness like a virus or a sickness or something like that, whether that's an ideology, a philosophy, a political stance, but that that something like knowledge or technology is not always a good thing, and that is reflected in Star Wars a lot, because we see something like the Death Star, we see the Star Destroyers, we see how the Empire is able to control the whole galaxy with technology. You might be thinking, well, hang on, Fred, this is happening right now. Well, of course it is. But this is one of those themes. This is one of those themes and lessons that it's trying to communicate. And it's always permeated through Star Wars. If you don't have that theme of Pandora's box, then you're doing something wrong. Because it's definitely a Star Wars theme. And then, of course, you've got Starkiller Base, which was just another bigger Star Destroyer, really. And then you have Theseus, who is aware that there is a Minotaur that rules some sort of labyrinth. But you can't navigate this labyrinth on your own. And actually, he gets help. And so the story of Theseus and not getting lost in the labyrinth because he uses a ball of string, because he's given a ball of string to help get through and actually defeat the Minotaur. This is reflected in Star Wars in a couple of different ways. And that is that to get where you need to be, to deal with the threats you have to deal with, you need some help. So that means Luke Skywalker needs Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda to train him and teach him. That Anakin needs Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon and their guidance to actually get him out of the situation he is as a slave and become something else, become a Jedi. It's reflected in the stories of Star Wars so much. And even when you look at the Jedi, even the Jedi need assistance. The Jedi are relying in some respects on something that doesn't seem to have a physical entity. It's the Force. So it's again the story of Theseus in many respects. I was talking about the story of Icarus before, about how Icarus flies too close to the sun, his wings melt and he falls into the sea and dies because he didn't listen to what his father told him to do, which do not fly too high. Do not fly close to the sun. That's actually reflected in the first movies with Luke Skywalker, where he doesn't listen to everything that he is told. And it's definitely part of Empire Strikes Back, where he's told that he shouldn't go and help his friends because he's not ready to face Darth Vader. And as we find out, he isn't. He's no match for Darth Vader. And he winds up losing his hand. And this is sort of, I guess, another sort of reflection of, when you think about it, if he had listened, he would have lost his friends. But later on, there's a new lesson where we have Obi-Wan, not so much Yoda saying it, I do remember it was Obi-Wan's Force Ghost saying that you need to face Darth Vader and you need to defeat him. And Luke Skywalker is adamant. Now, he's not a young person anymore. He's a full adult. He's been through, he's made mistakes, and he's paid for it. He's not listened when he should have, but he's finally done his training, and he's got his final step. He has to face Darth Vader. And Obi-Wan is sort of adamant that he's going to have to kill Darth Vader. But he knows that Darth Vader is his father, and Luke Skywalker's, no, that I can't do. I've listened to everything else that you've said, and I did ignore you at one point, but this is something I cannot do. And this is where Luke Skywalker is no longer really just the novice. He is now entering not the child state, but the father state. He's now the father himself. And so it's interesting how that works. It's also, when you think about the battle between Darth Maul and Qui-Gon, And the fact that, you know, one of the first things that was discussed by Qui-Gon is Qui-Gon said that we need to face Darth Vader, Darth Maul together. That they need to fight him together. And Qui-Gon doesn't listen to his own advice. And he winds up paying the price. And then it's left to Obi-Wan Kenobi to actually defeat Darth Maul. And that's another reflection of the story of Icarus. Even when the council sent Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon off to find this Darth Maul, they were like, the two of them need to be together to do this. It's going to be difficult, and that doesn't happen. And if they had, it would have been a completely different story, because together they were much stronger, and they had the upper hand. And then, of course, the last one is King Midas. Now, King Midas' golden touch is about greed to a large extent, but it's also about power, and that is definitely reflected in the Emperor, Prince Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, not Prince Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, who strives for everything, control over everything, and it does eventually turn on him. But in an odd way, because his insistence on forcing those around him to turn to the dark side and to be the way that he is actually winds up creating a monster. It is Darth Vader that is basically his apprentice, who turns on him and takes him out, which he did to his own master. So it is, it's an interesting combination. Hello, Pat Sherwood. How are you doing? Happy New Year to you too. And all that was left was a new hope. Fair enough. Very true. Very true. Okay. I am going to go on holiday. I'm not going to promise that I'll be painting live. I may not. But I will probably, I'm not going to promise, but I will probably put up some painting videos that I have hidden onto my channel. That's sort of where my head is at with that today. I was thinking about the last 4 months have been harder than the last. It's been so difficult to deal with. And I'm thinking maybe I need to take even a lot more time for myself. So this is probably me signing off for the whole holiday. We'll see how we go. That doesn't mean I'm gone. It just means I'm taking a bit of a break. Thundar was the first Jedi. Prove me wrong. I'm not going to try to do that. I'm not worried about that sort of stuff. Anyway, it's interesting to see how people have been responding. Have you played a Star Wars tabletop role-playing game? And no, 59% have said no. Now, if you play D&D 5e, you could play a Star Wars campaign, because there is Star Wars 5e, people. Yes, 27%. Well, that's good to see. Just watching 9% and sort of 4%. And I kind of understand the sort of 4% out of 22 votes. Anyway, I am done. I am spent. I need to go and take a break. So I'm going to go and do that. You guys look after yourself. Have a good time with whatever you're up to. Hopefully it's not work. Hopefully you're able to do something with your time that's enjoyable. And I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. I want to thank all of you. You've really made a big difference. Pat Sherwood is a moderator and a patron, by the way. So thank you for being here. And Pat has been here with me as a patron much longer than he said he would be. He's stuck with me for a long, long time, and I really do appreciate it. I have some surprises in the new year when I come back. I don't know if people are going to like it or not. Take a well-earned break, Fred. Hopefully you and Dave get some painting done. David is actually not painting right now, as it happens. Stuart, he is stopped, and he's doing a different journey right now. So thank you to everybody who took part in the poll. Thank you for watching and listening. Hopefully this was useful to you. I really do encourage you to give Star Wars a go. It's definitely a very different way of doing things, but there's lots to draw from. There's lots to learn from it. And I never regretted playing a Star Wars campaign. Both campaigns that I played in. One I played, one I game mastered, never regretted either one of them. It was definitely a good time. So thank you to everybody who's been in chat. Prepare, Cook and Survive, Pale Rider, Pat Sherwood. We had Eric here as well, Eric R. And Fred Huber, who dropped in just at the very beginning and then had to take off. I do appreciate you being here. It's been good to chat about one of my favourite topics. And Nacho Man, who is a patron as well, who's probably playing Dungeons and Dragons at this very moment. So anyway, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And may the force be with you. And until next time, I'm not going to say till next time, keep rolling those 20s. I'm going to say till next time, keep playing tabletop role-playing games. Because that's what I really mean.